the initial information with an adult female that was said to be missing.
I noticed that the same lights were still on, and that made me feel kind of strange because obviously Sasha had never come back.
Did you ever see Sasha again after you had dinner with her that night?
I did not.
I just said, you gotta get someone out there. There's a body out there, you gotta get someone to help.
I'm just gonna ask you straight. Were you involved in Sasha Krause's homicide? Sasha Krause.
I determined the cause of death to be a gunshot wound injury of the head and a blunt force injury of the head.
After his arrest, did Mark ask you to remotely wipe his phone?
Yes, I believe so.
On the 21st through the early morning of 22nd, Mark's phone records, his Nilo location, show him returning to the area where Sasha's body was later found.
We were talking about the resentment the defendant had against Mennonites. Your understanding that Mark Gooch did not have a positive experience in the Mennonite church.
You could say that.
By all accounts and what we've heard in trial, Sasha Krause was a light to her family, her community, light to the world. This defendant snuffed it out. We won't be able to bring that light back.
The defendant was there, that he abducted Sasha, put her in his car, and then drove hours away to the area of the Sunset Crater National Monument. Nobody saw this happen. Nobody even heard anything. Nobody knew Sasha was missing, in fact, until much later that night. Around 1:30 a.m. the next morning, this is January 19th, one of Sasha's roommates woke up, noticed that there was a light on, a light that they had left on for Sasha, in fact. Sasha wasn't there. She nervously texted another roommate asking where Sasha was. They tried calling her, no answer, went straight to voicemail. Soon others in the community started waking up. The police arrived at the scene. A search began for Sasha. But as you'll learn, by that time, Sasha was likely already dead. The defendant had removed her from her community, taken her hours away, as I mentioned, to the Sunset Crater National Monument. He was driving down some of those remote roads after midnight on the 19th. At some point, the defendant duct taped Sasha's wrists together in front of her. He bashed her head so hard that it caused skull fractures. And then he pulled out his .22 caliber rifle, he pointed it at the back of her head, and fired one shot, killing her. Sasha's body remained in that area, face down in some cinders, while the defendant got into his car and drove back to his Air Force base.
The evidence that will be presented is that he is a peaceful, non-violent person. Well, no one saw Mark Gooch at the church area. No one. No one saw Mark Gooch at or near Sasha Krause's car. No one saw Mark Gooch in the church building. No one saw Mark Gooch leave the area. Nobody saw Mark Gooch's car at any time. At the scene of the church area where the disappearance occurred, there's not a sign that Mark Gooch was ever there. No tire tracks, talked about that nobody saw his car. There is not a fingerprint on the door. There's not a hair or a fiber found. They looked high and low, all of Sasha Krause's material. And she had lots of journals and had lots of writings and all of this types of communications. Not one indication that she had ever any knowledge of or had any familiarity with Mark Gooch.
indication that she would have left without telling anybody?
Not at all.
At any point during that day, did Sasha indicate to you that she intended to go to the church later?
That's right.
And what was the reason for that?
To pick up some Sunday school material.
Okay, Sunday being the next day.
That's right.
Was she a Sunday school teacher?
She was substituting for someone.
You don't recall her coming back from a church or showing you she got books, is that right?
No, I do not.
Did you ever see Sasha again after you had dinner with her that night?
I did not.
At 1:30, I just woke up and I don't remember any noise or anything. I just woke up and I noticed that the same lights were still on, and that made me feel kind of strange because obviously Sasha had never come back. I texted Lily. I said, "Where is Sasha? I'm scared."
And was that right when you woke up?
I think so. I think it was really quickly. Mm-hmm.
I got up and said she's in her bedroom, and then I went and looked and she was not. So then we went down to the church house.
Do you recall a time where she ever missed curfew before?
No, she did not.
Right. And it would be uncommon for most people to miss a curfew. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Did you ever see any suspicious cars?
I did not.
Did you ever see any individuals that stood out as not a part of the community?
I did not.
Is it fair to say that you're generally familiar with people who would be at the community?
That's right.
Familiar generally with the cars they would drive?
That's right.
A car that does not belong and an individual that doesn't belong would be noteworthy. Is that
That's
fair?
right.
We walked in, it was all dark. There wasn't anything really to see. It just looked like a church house would look at night. It was just dark, and we went through the whole thing just looking for her, and nothing seemed unusual. We just didn't find her.
Was there anything that stood out to you? Any signs of struggle or anything that seemed out of place?
There were not. The church was very neat and orderly.
I would say yes, it had gone cold, meaning they had followed up on all the leads they had up until that point, and they were at a bit of a standstill until we found Sasha's body.
I was hoping that the person was sleeping.
Okay. So what did you do?
And I just looked at the body and I said, ma'am, really loudly, a couple times, ma'am. And there was no movement. And I knew it was not good. It was a body, and it was like face down, and I could see that there was a green wrapping next to the white part. And then I could see the calves of the person, and I just said, "You gotta get someone out there. There's a body out there, you gotta get someone to help."
So the bullet wound was on the back side of the head, pretty, fairly low, and again, a little bit to the right of the midline, so the back lower right side of the head.
Did you determine a cause of death?
Yes.
What was that?
So I determined the cause of death to be a gunshot wound injury of the head and a blunt force injury of the head.
Where was the last ping of Sasha's cell phone?
The last ping, without having an exact coordinate with me to recall, would have been in the area north of Toyac Casino, which is on Route 491 from Farmington if you head west towards Shiprock, New Mexico.
Through those three areas that we just talked about, in that time frame, how many devices were hitting off those towers at that time?
For all three locations?
All three.
On Verizon and T-Mobile, none. And for AT&T, there's only one device that hits all three of those locations and corresponds with those time periods. past the Sunset Crater. We see it out there at 103. And then it turns around and it comes back to the east. And we see it, the last time we see it is at 113, east of Sunset Crater. And then we're not going to see it again until 03:33, which is a 2 hour and 20 minute gap of time.
All right. And so you don't see the device popping up anywhere in that 2 hour, 20 minutes?
No, not at all. Well, with the data down below 200 meters, we see nothing that would show that it clearly has left this area.
So, in other words, the device, it could have been right at the body site.
Absolutely.
Is that fair?
Sure.
Okay. It may not have been, you can't say.
That is correct.
But we've heard testimony that there is no cell phone coverage at the body site. Does that have an effect?
That's going to have an effect, yes.
What do you think should happen to the death of Sasha? Well, if somebody killed her, I guess that's what I'm investigating is my job. I'm trying to gauge, because you just mentioned how you don't like the Mennonites and other things up. So I'm asking you if we caught the person, what should happen?
In this particular car, one of the first things that stood out to me when I first opened it was that it was exceptionally clean, much cleaner than any of the vehicles that I've ever processed before. Specifically, I was asked to try and find any evidence that could potentially link a deceased victim to that vehicle. I found some vice grips, and those had a red-brown staining on there that I suspected of being blood.
Did you do any preliminary tests at that point?
I did. I did a Kasselmeyer test, and that to me indicated the presence of blood.
Can you tell this jury whether any evidence relating to Sasha Krause's person, her DNA, her hair, her fingerprints, any of that material was located within this car?
Well, I can tell you the items of evidence that were located that may potentially be linked to this missing person, but
Asking about her person specifically, DNA, hair, or any other trace evidence like that.
without knowing what was submitted to the laboratory for testing, I wouldn't be able to answer that, no.
Let me give you a scenario. If someone's hands were duct taped so their palms were together in this fashion, would that make it significantly harder to leave fingerprints or latent prints on an item?
Yes.
Did you take possession of that rifle?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and where did you put it?
In the gun safe.
Inside your house?
Yes, sir.
All right. Was there any ammunition with it?
Yes, sir.
What type of rifle was it?
It was a .22 long rifle.
What would be the consequence if someone had a gun on a base unregistered?
They would be arrested, and they would be prosecuted.
Did Mark Gooch ever register a gun with the Armory?
Not at all. Immediately after our meeting with Coconino County Sheriff's Office, I ended up recalling a number of my agents in, so that way we can put a surveillance package or bubble around him, because obviously the allegation and the severity, we just want to make sure that we have eyes on people.
Are you still Mennonite? I don't really know how to word that.
I tried to go to, I was trying to find a Mennonite church for a while to go to.
Oh, really? Where's the closest Mennonite church to here?
I think they have one over here.
I'm just gonna ask you straight. Were you involved with Sasha Krause's homicide? Did you know Sasha Krause? Did you know somebody?
remember having a conversation about him getting his car cleaned?
I do.
Okay. Do you remember him talking about getting it detailed?
Yes.
After his arrest, did Mark ask you to remotely wipe his phone?
Yes, I believe so.
And not just his phone, but the SD cards as well?
Based on the transcripts, that is correct.
Is it your understanding that Mark Gooch did not have a positive experience in the Mennonite church?
You could say that.
I'm asking you what you could say.
That would be a question for Mark Gooch.
So you're telling us under oath now that Mark Gooch never told you he had a grudge. This is something you just told the police.
Those were my own words. Mark would have never, to my recollection, Mark's never said those words to me.
Has he said something similar to you about having a negative opinion about Mennonites?
In our discussions, negative conversations about Mennonites did occur.
Tell me about it.
I can't recall a specific conversation.
Okay. Well, the gist of the conversation was what?
We would talk about our upbringing and how we didn't necessarily want to follow that, or different things we disagreed with.
Because we were not born in the Mennonite community, there was some rough spots, simply because we didn't always see things eye to eye.
Were you aware the defendant referred to the church and members of it as a cult?
Not to my knowledge.
The defendant, Mark, he doesn't have a converted heart. What is a converted heart?
What the scripture says is you've turned from darkness to light. What it says is you've decided to follow the Lord with your entire heart and what the tenets of the scripture would call for.
Okay. So he had not yet turned from darkness to light.
Right.
Your brother Jake, the police officer, indicates he just gave a Mennonite a ticket. This is a group text, right, to you and Mark Gooch?
Correct.
Right. And what was the date and time for that?
March 14th, 2020, 8:48 a.m.
And what was Mark Gooch's response?
Yes.
Yes, and how many exclamation marks?
4.
And then what's his next text from Mark Gooch?
I hope you treated them like.
And Jake Gooch talks about coughing. Can you read that?
I coughed on him so he would spread corona to the wedding they were going to, LOL.
And what was Mark's response?
Aha, that's hilarious.
We know that Sasha was a strict adherent to the Mennonite faith and their tenets. She did not believe in violence. She believed in being a pacifist. Is it possible the defendant pulled a gun on her and told her just to get in the car? Sure. Is it possible he just threatened her with violence if she got into the car? Sure. Bashed her head and shot her in the back of the head. We heard from the medical examiner that these injuries were acute. There was no healing present, and that her heart was beating still as there was hemorrhaging at these wound sites. Picture in your mind what this must have looked like. Sasha being marched from the car, hit in the back of the head, crumpled to the ground. Defendant shoots her in the back of the head with his .22 caliber rifle. Then leaves her in the dirt, face down, where she wouldn't be discovered for weeks later. By all accounts and what we've heard in trial, Sasha Krause was a light to her family, her community, light to the world. This defendant snuffed it out. You won't be able to bring that light back.
They didn't bring you anybody that told you anything different that Mark Gooch is not violent. They didn't bring you one person that says Mark Gooch hated those officers. He hated them. He had a grudge against them terribly. Not one independent individual known to Mark, went to school with him, member of the church, in the community, that says anything like that whatsoever. And remember that the detective had months to plan. Mr. Gooch had no warning that she was coming.
came with a ruse that it was a drug-related investigation, or not investigation, just a random drug test of the base. And how did he respond to all of that? Did he run and hide? Did he engage in concealment? He didn't do any of those things. After he found out what was there, and remember, his initial response, why are we here? Traffic ticket because I'm speeding on my bike? We had no clue.
The jury has returned guilty verdicts on count 1, first-degree murder, and count 2, kidnapping. The court finds the defendant guilty of count 3, theft, a class 1 misdemeanor in the indictment. The court does believe that the defendant's conduct shown in this case, with this horrific abduction and murder, shows he is a very serious danger to the community. Is this court's sentence on count 1, first-degree murder, that the defendant is sentenced to prison for natural life.